For those of you that don't know, Airmech is a new RTS game by Carbon Games in which you take control of a mech that is able to produce and place units. Now the game has some very obvious MOBA qualities about it which fit in perfectly with the RTS setting. The character gains passive skill upgrades as you level, and you also have a single secondary ability at your disposal. The aim of most of the game modes is to push forward on the map and take over the enemy outposts by helping your NPC units to enter and capture them in hope that the extra map control and resources gained from these outposts will enable you to finally destroy the main base of the enemy. However, you won't be able to do that alone, in which case you have an array of units available at your disposal. For each game you choose a loadout of 8 different unit types that you can create during the various stages of the match. I'm going to take you for a look at the various different unit types and offer some strategies and opinions on the uses of each one. Every mech has the passive ability to have guardians accompanying them, starting off at level 1 with a single guardian slot. When the player reaches level 4, 8 and 12, they will receive an extra guardian slot, therefore allowing the player to have more guardians with them. However, whenever you level up in Airmech, you receive 1 point to place in your ability slots, and can increase the amount of guardians past the 4 that are available from just leveling up. The first on our list is the Repair Guardian, which offers repairs to your mech as you move around the map. It's a fairly cheap unit, costing only 600 resources, and has the lowest repair power of all the repair units. However, that shouldn't discourage you from using it, as it's a personal healing unit for the mechs and does not affect the healing on any other units. On the other hand, all of the mech guardians are fairly weak and are destroyed very easily when the mech is engaged in combat. The Blaster Guardian is my personal favourite guardian that I usually use mid-game to increase my firepower against other mechs and units. As you may have worked out, the Blaster Guardian accompanies the player mech, shooting in the same direction as the player, offering extra damage. It's only a small boost of 30 damage per hit on ground units and 15 on air units. However, when you have 3 or 4 of these Blast Guardians with you, you'll pack a serious punch. The Radar Guardian, as you may assume, increases the radar sight of your mech. Now, I've never really seen the point in using this Guardian, as the maps are fairly small and you can very easily just fly over to the enemy side of the base and see what they're doing and escape intact. That being said, if you're using a mech with a low defense, you may want to invest in these so you don't have to make suicide runs to scout the enemy. The Soldier is the basic NPC unit that traverses the map looking for outposts to capture, and that is precisely the point in this unit. As a mech, you can have additional soldiers produced that you can carry inside your mech, up to a maximum of 3, and transport them across the map. The reasoning for the maximum carry weight of 3 soldiers is because it only takes 4 soldiers to completely capture an outpost. A common tactic using the soldiers is to queue up a production line of around 5 of them and carry 3 soldiers behind enemy lines to capture one of their less defended outposts, whilst returning for the other 2 to hopefully succeed in capturing the point. These are very cheap units costing only 500 resources and are my personal favourite choice of capture units. Forged with a lust of running, runners act as a faster, more expensive but weaker capture unit to the soldiers. Their strength is in their speed. Primarily an early game unit, they can capture all of the initial outposts needed at the start of a match very fast, and can also be used in a strike on enemy outposts to overwhelm and capture with speed and surprise. Now the Probe is the fastest capture unit available to the player, and is just under 2 times the speed of the runner and more than double the speed of the soldier. However, this is of course at a cost. The Probe is a very weak unit with only 35 points of defense, and has no weapons. However, these things move like hell. They're like a man on a mission, a rebel without a cause. They will capture an outpost faster than you can say, "Please don't capture that outpost. I was using that to heal my mech, damn you." I've heard many things about the instability of this unit. Most of them refer to the fact that the boomer is like a ticking time bomb and unpredictably explodes. Apparently it is being fixed, so it's not a unit I would use in the current build of the beta. However, this is another unit that can capture outposts. SAM, standing for Surface-to-Air Missile Bot. This is essentially the polar opposite of the Probe, as it moves incredibly slowly and is in fact one of the slowest units in the game. However, it is a very robust and strong capture unit that also packs a punch, offering almost twice the damage of that of a soldier. So if slow and steady wins the race is your motto, then I would advise these guys. And the last of our capture units is the Fixer. This is essentially a medical unit that goes around healing units that need it, as well as disarming any mines that are in its path. However, they will not stay in combat, and will capture outposts they come across like any other capture unit, so using them as a main healing unit is a definite no. Alternatively, they can be used to accompany other capture units into a heavily defended base to capture it that way. Now we move on to some of the early to mid-game units that your main force could consist of. The Zipper is the fastest unit available in your arsenal, and therefore a viable tactic for such a unit is to send them in early game to grief the enemy if their defences are low. This will act as a fairly cheap and annoying distraction for the enemy, which could give you the upper hand in outpost captures early on in the match. They deal small amounts of damage and are stronger than all of the capture units, so they can easily be used to destroy your enemy capture units. An upgrade up from the Zipper is the Tango. This has an increased cost of 300 resources at the benefit of more firepower and a significant increase in defense, whilst also moving only marginally slower than the Zipper. The tactics for this unit are fairly similar to the Zipper, it just depends on how much dosh you've got lying around. A Jackal is essentially a medium armoured vehicle that has a mounted turret on the top and acts as a further upgrade to the Tango. The Jackal takes a hit in both speed and the cost of the unit at a benefit of more than double the firepower and a much more solid defense. Jackals are very much a low to early mid-game unit that often is used to do rushes on outposts in groups, as the sheer numbers you can produce with a fairly low cost enables you to build a substantial force of swift and punchy units. The Longhorn is very much a unit that is utilised throughout the course of the whole of a match. It is useful up to the very point you destroy the enemy base. The reason why the Longhorn is so useful is because it's both a good unit to use in attacking with as well as defending your bases. With a huge 1500 points of defense, it takes a hell of a lot to destroy one of these tanks, especially when it's dealing a good bit of damage itself. It will usually outlast any encounter with another individual unit, and is used effectively in big groups or positioned tactically in front of the entrance to an outpost, and therefore blocking access for capture units. The only downfall is the price of this unit being 4,500 resources, however in mid-game scenarios they are reasonably affordable. The Gemini is a slight upgrade from the Longhorn at the increased price of 5,000 resources. They offer an additional 15 points of damage, but take a knock in speed and production time. However, for only 500 extra, the extra damage they cause is entirely worth it, as tanks have no real need to move very fast. Gemini can be used as a replacement for Longhorns. The Armadillo is a weaker tank with regards to damage compared to the Gemini, and is in fact the weakest of the tanks. However, this also makes it the cheapest of the tanks. Still with a fairly strong 800 defense, the Armadillo is an early game tank that could replace the Jackal in your loadout due to its greater defense and acceptable speed, making it a good choice as a lightweight early attacking unit. There's not really much I can say about the Goliath, other than the fact that it owns, and that anyone who gets in its way will die a horrible, horrible death. The Goliath takes no prisoners. These are the most expensive attacking units, costing 16,500 resources each, and they have the biggest defense out of all of the units in-game, totaling 3,300 defense points. Not only that, but they hit like a truck, or more appropriately a massive tank, dealing a huge 144 damage per hit. However, with great power comes great responsibility, as only players who reach level 7 or above can create these units in-game, and they are mostly used in the end-game scenario to make the last push. It usually takes a mere 2 or 3 of these Goliaths to destroy an enemy base. If undefended, one could annihilate the enemy before they could do anything about it. These are extremely powerful units, and you'd be silly not to have them in your loadout. The Patcher is an early to mid-game repair vehicle that regenerates the health of damaged units, and is the third best healing unit in the game. Not only does it heal damaged units, but it also speeds up the reload time of units as well as disarming any mines that are in its way. Patches are a fairly useful unit when accompanying a rush of Longhorns or Gemini, as they move at pretty much the same speed and can greatly increase your chances of taking over the outpost you're pushing for. However, keep note that these units are very susceptible to attack, as the enemy mechs, if they know what they're doing, will target Patches, as they know it will help destroy your units quicker. Therefore it's advised to position your Patches in the middle of groups of units, so that they are less accessible. Ratchet is an upgrade from the Patcher, and is the best healing unit that is available, not only because it heals the most, but it also has the biggest defense of the healing units. They are also very affordable, costing only 2,200 to build. However, due to the greater increase in defense, they also take a hit in speed, so you may see even your heaviest of units outrunning your Ratchets, as they do have the lowest speed of the units available, along with the Goliath and many other heavy units. So a good tactic is to accompany Ratchets with your heavy units in the mid to end game scenario. The Seeker is an anti-air missile tank that deals the most damage to air units out of all the units at your disposal, and are great for defending a base from enemy mechs that are hoping to drop off some capture units. They also have a hefty 1,000 defense, meaning they can take a serious beating. However, the question is, do you choose to have an expensive mobile unit It deals a lot of damage to air units, or do you opt to go for a stationary unit like the T-99 that targets both ground and air units? The real strategy lies around using these units primarily in defense. However, when making a push for an outpost or the enemy base, they act as a great way to destroy enemy mechs flying in and trying to kill off your main attack force. Bucky is essentially a cross between a Seeker and a T-99 rocket turret, a fairly cheap unit that can missile bombard both ground and air units, but with weaker damage to that of a Seeker and a T-99. It also has a very low defense, making it incredibly easy to destroy. Although, the tactic lies in whether you want a weaker unit that can help keep mechs at bay, whilst also sitting in the back of your army bombarding units at the front, or whether you want to have a loadout that consists of both a really good anti-air unit and a very good ground turret. There is an ultimate version of the unit Bucky, which is substantially stronger. However, this is not allowed for PvP. I've mentioned this unit a few times, and you may have been wondering, what the hell is a T-99? Well, if you don't know, the T-99 is a stationary rocket turret that focuses on attacking both ground and air units. However, they are incredibly expensive, totaling 8,300 resources per turret. Despite the cost, they are also very much worth it, especially in the 30 seconds of setup time you receive at the start of the game, as they are purchasable at 50% off in that time period, meaning they cost only 4,150 resources and do the same damage as a Gemini tank to ground units, as well as 50% damage to air units, whilst also being cheaper than the 5,000 resources it costs to make a Gemini tank. I'm going to also take this time to explain the nodes system that Airmech has. Each base or outpost has between 1 and 6 nodes that branch off the base or outpost. These nodes can have certain units placed on them which grant specific rewards. If a T-99, for instance, is placed on one of these nodes, it actually increases the amount of damage the T-99 does, in which case a good tactic is to place T-99s on the nodes of outposts closest to the enemy, so that it's harder for them to take your outposts over and helps you hold the line against them. The Grinder is another stationary turret unit like the T-99, but this fires light caliber rounds instead at a high rate of fire. The Grinder is ideal for taking out light armoured units like Jackals, Zippers and Tangos, and of course all of the capture units. They cost significantly less than the T-99 and offer the biggest ground unit damage of all the units available, not including traps units like bombs and mines. They do more damage than the Goliath, however they will do significantly less damage to units that have heavy armour and are obviously easily destroyed by heavy tanks. Therefore, grinders are best used in situations where defense is a primary objective, as when accompanied with units that can take out the heavier units, they will excel at removing any light units around. They could also be placed at outposts alone to defend from capture units, but will be easily targeted by mechs or heavy units being dropped in by enemy players. The HAAT is essentially a stationary version of the Bucky and Seeker units, but when compared to the Seeker is actually an entirely inferior unit. The Seeker unit is not only mobile, but it does more damage to air units, has a higher defense, costs almost 50% less time to produce, and is 3,300 resources cheaper, in which case I would advise staying clear of the HAAT. Arty, as you may have guessed, is an artillery turret that can fire a very long distance across the map to hit ground units. This is especially useful if you position Arty on the edge of a hill near an enemy outpost, as it can then repeatedly bombard the ground units of that location. This is a relatively cheap unit, but I personally don't think the damage is rewarding enough to use it, especially when partnered with the fact it cannot fire behind itself and has to be positioned perfectly to function well. Equally, it is susceptible to close-quarter attacks that it cannot defend itself from. That being said, if you have a loadout that can defend your Arty from enemy fire, then using this unit to bombard your foe is a sound tactic. Archy is much like Arty in almost every way, shape and form. Archy costs only 200 more than Arty, but has a significant increase in the distance in which it can bombard the enemy. Archy deals 10 less damage than Arty, however this would seem more like the unit out of the two that I would use, as it makes me feel like Archy is more secure, as he is much further away in the back of my defences, and therefore allows me not to have many, if any, units protecting it. Now this is the mother of all artillery. No really, that's what it says in the game. This is another unit that can only be built at level 7. Bertha comes packed with some heavy damage per shot, as well as being the unit with the second highest defense, second only to the monstrous Goliath. This unit will set you back 10,500 resources, and is most definitely a late game unit that is easily used to destroy the enemy defences from afar. If you just can't break down enemies' well-kept defences, then you might want to invest in a couple of these. They are totally prepared to wreak some havoc. Now both your main base and the enemy main base have health bars. Each time they take damage, the health bar decreases, as you would imagine. However, the health of your base does not regenerate unless you have the Lunchbox unit. This unit is placed on a node or pad connected to your base and will recharge the health of your fortress up to a certain point, making this a useful unit to have if you find yourself constantly getting rushed by players who swoop in and drop off enemy units into your main base. Equally, this unit can be placed on an outpost node and will act as a slow field for incoming enemy infantry, making it easier to defend your outposts from capture unit drops. Much like the Lunchbox, the Honeypot is only useful if placed on a node. The Honeypot acts as a healing unit and has the most defense of any healing units in the game. A good tactic for this unit is to place it in front of your main base or in an outpost to keep your defending units alive long enough to hold off any waves of enemy units that attack. However, due to its healing nature, it will be a primary target for enemy mechs, so defending it should be your primary objective. In which case, accompanying it with some anti-air units like the Seeker or maybe some T-99s would be a good defensive tactic. Now this is what it's all about. Moneymakers make you rich, they make you happy, they make you even richer, and allow you to buy some serious units. Moneymakers are how you generate your money supply. If you don't build any of these, you're going to run out of funds very rapidly. Much like the Lunchbox and Honeypot, these need to be placed on a node, and my advice would be to place one on all of the nodes in your main base, as well as the outposts on your side of the map. The more moneymakers on nodes, the more money you will have, in which case, enemies will often try and sneak behind your lines and destroy your moneymakers, which is very damaging, so be sure to keep an eye on them and make sure they're still up, and even employ this tactic to destroy the enemy's moneymakers, as it will overall make them much weaker. The Lockbox is a very expensive unit, costing 10,000 resources, and allows a player mech to store credits that can be transferred to the other player on their team. It has a very low defense of only 400, and quite frankly, I don't see much point in it. I obviously see the point in sharing the money with maybe one player, so they can build some really good and expensive units. However, the price of the Lockbox is way too expensive for what it is, in my opinion. I say this, but the next unit is far more ridiculous. Behold, the Safebox. Now with slightly more health than the Lockbox, but costing 20,000 more resources to make. I really don't get this unit. If you do, let me know. Still, not as crazy as the next unit. Behold, the Vaultbox. Now with slightly more health than the Safebox, but costing 45,000 resources more to build. If the player has that much money to spend on a bloody Vaultbox, then why don't they make the sodding units themselves? I really do not get it. However, it makes me feel less ridiculous using the Lockbox now, so maybe that's its purpose. It may be used more in PvE, but I just don't know why you wouldn't just build the units yourself. Now that we're back on Earth, the bot spawner. This allows you to produce an extra capture unit when your NPC capture units are released from an outpost or your main base. These have to be attached to a node to work and cost 5,400 resources. I personally wouldn't use these, as one extra bot doesn't tend to make much of a difference, especially the NPC generated ones. And seeing as though you can build soldiers yourself for 500 each, it seems a bit pointless to use up a node on a bot spawner when it could be used on something more beneficial like a T-99 for defense or a moneymaker to generate resources. The booster is a short-term perk for your mech that increases the speed and carry capacity of your airmech for the duration that you're in the air mode and as long as you don't run out of fuel. This is particularly useful if you want to drop a Goliath in an enemy base, as normally picking up a Goliath will slow down most airmechs. However, with the speed boost you will move at a faster pace and are more likely to be able to drop a Goliath unit right next to the enemy base, which can, if the defences are low, destroy the enemy fortress on its own. Without a booster or a faster mech, you're likely to be shot down trying to use this tactic. There isn't much to say about bombs that you probably don't know already. You get a cluster of 3 bombs instead of being able to transport units, and they are useful for destroying that defiant defense you've been gyrating at for the past 10 minutes. They're fairly cheap and pack a fairly powerful punch if you use all three at once. They're certainly something I would have on backup in your loadout in the eventuality that they are needed. The Heavy Mine. The trap that does the most damage to ground units in the game, smacking them with a steadfast 1000 damage if they happen to step over it. This is a fairly low cost trap at only 1200 resources and is extremely effective against heavily armoured units. A good tactic for the heavy mines is to use them on roads that you know the enemy is likely to push and attack. Hopefully they will explode in the middle of their units and deal maximum damage to those in the vicinity. Light mines are 75% cheaper than heavy mines and deal 400 less damage. You may think that it's an obvious choice to go for the light mines over the heavy mines. However, these light mines will do barely any damage to heavy units, which is what most of the units you're facing are likely to be. Light mines are very much an early game trap unit that can help initially defend your outposts from being taken over. However, beyond the early stages of the game, they become redundant. And lastly, we have the beautiful bear trap. This old-fashioned thing will kill off those pesky infantry. It's a rather kooky unit that doesn't cost very much but deals a hell of a lot of damage to infantry. This is a trap unit you could use throughout the game as they're very cheap and offer good protection for your outposts from those pesky capture units. And that is it from me. That is everything covered that is currently in the game as of the 3rd of August 2012 with regards to units. We'll also be doing a video on the different mech types you can use, so if you've enjoyed or benefited from this, then feel free to subscribe to me, and I shall see you then.